Hi, so this is like a continuation of the video I just made on the word. I think I titled it The Word Do Not Fear Again because I've kind of been putting a lot of encouragement videos about fear in these days. So, as I said, I spent my time watching silly movies versus basking in the Word when I wasn't feeling well. And So now that I'm feeling better and I have to go to work, I got into the Word and I started reading Nehemiah. So, Nehemiah chapter 1, this is going to be a lot of scripture reading. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hachaliah, it came to pass in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. So they're talking about the Babylonian captivity. And sometimes, so, it's really interesting. There's shadows of what's to come in our past and in the past scriptures in the Old Testament to the New, they kind of cross reference to each other, and um, also they have physical and yet also a spiritual connotation to them. And so with this one, it's, don't we sometimes feel like our wall is broken down and our gates are burned with fire? This is not an easy time we're in, and I know that many of you, even though maybe you've kept your jobs and has been able to pay your bills and maybe remain somewhat stable physically, our spiritual self has been under attack, our mental self has been under attack, and there's been something like never has been before that is going on worldwide right now. It's unlike World War II or World War One. It's unlike these things. It's different. And so sometimes we can feel like our walls are broken down and our gates are burned with fire. And so I want to admonish you that um, even our brethren back in the days of the captivity of Babylon, the Hebrews, the Jews, also, the physical Jerusalem wall was broken down and the gate was burned with fire. And we are now the Jerusalem. So, and I don't want to get into that, but I believe we are now the Jerusalem. We are now the temple. And so when it's broken down and burned with fire, that also in these days, there's a double whammy. You have the Christian church and the division happening. You see the apostasy going on in the Christian church today, in the larger churches and the larger denominations, even in the Pentecostals and all over the place. There's been broken down walls and the gates burned with fire. So that's also the physical and the spiritual going on. So I thought, well, so what happened, Lord? What's going on with Babylon? And are we, my question was, and this is, I'm not teaching you, I'm sharing. I'm sharing. This is real, folks. We are in a real world. Don't just look at the video and not consider what a brother or sister is saying, but consider and pray, right? And say, oh, wow, because if we're in a time of distress with our walls broken down and our gates burned with fire, right? In great distress, if we're really now um, experiencing Babylon as Babylon back then we need wisdom and we need each other and encouragement. So let's read something here. And this is a lot of scripture reading, so please bear with me. Revelation chapter 17. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Now, many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with wine and her fornication. Now the kings here, are leaders. The kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine and her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit unto the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her head a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. So when is the time when this is like this? Now you could almost say in World War II it was maybe similar. It's coming out now how, like, even America were Nazi supporters, things like that. So, World War II was pretty global. It did affect a lot of nations, but not all like it is today. And I saw the woman drunk with blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Now, I'm giving you insight into what Babylon is like, what it is. So I stopped there at verse 6, chapter 17, 1 through 6. But verses 7 through 16 goes into more kind of the parable, the beast that was, it is not, and this sort of thing, okay? And I don't want to get into that. What I want to do is get you an insight into what Babylon is according to Revelation. So, I'll go down to verse 13. These are of one mind. So the 10 horns are the 10 kings. So the leaders, right? The leaders of the world, of Babylon, of the world, 10 leaders, okay, are of one mind. And they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords, Kings of kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Now, that's us, okay? Now, I'm not saying this has happened yet. I'm saying maybe we're in that forerunner aspect. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So that's the world. I mean, to me, peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues, many languages, many nations, lots of people. And the 10 horns which you saw are the beast. They will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked of her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to fulfill his purpose to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. So this is going to happen. This is not something that can be prayed away, but it can be prayed with ease, prayed for mercy, prayed for grace, And the woman you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So these kings, these leaders, okay? But in verse 18, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a habitation of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. So here, verse 3 gives you an insight into what Babylon was like. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Okay, so in verse 4, so you understand that, right? In verse 3. So I would admonish you to try to read that. Ask yourself, who's Babylon? What is Babylon? Not who is Babylon. What's the character of Babylon? Verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, lest you receive of her plagues. So her future, she's going to have plagues, and they're calling God's people to come out of her. We don't exactly know what that means yet, but God will let us know when it's time if we're alive, or for those who are around at that time. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. He finally sees her sins. Render to her as she's rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works in the cup which she has mixed with her double. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow, for she says in her heart, I sit as queen. I am no widow. I will see no sorrow. Okay, so understand that's part of her character. But the earth mourns her destruction in verse 9. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city, for 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble. And you have to understand, when this was written, these were precious items back in the Roman time period. And cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots and bodies and souls of men. So remember, today, what would those luxurious items be? And the fruit that your soul longed has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. So it's a time when Babylon fell, there were a group of people who lived luxuriously. There were kings and leaders who lived in luxurious ways. And you see that now. You see in our times where there's that division. Because of the closures, we have a lot of businesses who were able to live their lives, be like middle class, and pay their bills and take their holidays, and not live luxuriously as such as this is reflecting. But that's going away, you see. And we know that there are few men that have made and reaped billions of dollars, billions, in the last 2 years. Anyway, verse 15, the merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. And every shipmaster, all who traveled by ship, sailors, as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance, and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, say, what is like that great city? And they threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. So that's just insight, right, as to who Babylon is, the character of Babylon. And I can kind of see a little shadow of that going on today. And I just want to encourage you, we might feel like our walls are broken and our gates are burned up, but back to my other video, and fear is not of the Lord. So be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. In Deuteronomy 31:6. God bless.